I think I might as well mention the actual how the surrender ceremony took place. You see, what really happens is that normally a defeated general comes up to the headquarters of the successful general with the white flag and says he wants to surrender. And he signs his surrender, and his troops then do surrender there. Now in this case, my headquarters was in Calcutta. Niazi was in Dhaka. And in any case, it was a liberation war, really.
Yes, sir.
So we felt the best thing was that the surrender take place
in Dhaka itself,
in Bangladesh or in Dhaka rather than anywhere else. And so we decided, now where should it take place in Dhaka? The choice was that it could be done at the airport in one of the lounges, then. But I said, well, if that happens, then the people of Dhaka would not have really seen that. And this is something that's more important from that. So I said, we will have this surrender ceremony at the Ramna Racecourse. That is the place from where Mujib had given a call, to his people. So we decided on the Ramna Racecourse. And I sent my staff officer off to tell him that it will be at Ramna Racecourse. And I expected him to come and meet me at the airport and then go to Ramna Racecourse to sign it. We also had to work out the surrender document, which I worked on it, but it then went up to Delhi over a teleprinter, and then the government finally approved of it. And that surrender document is today, as you know, is available to anybody and everybody. Now, the next question was that we wanted the whole thing finished on the 16th. It had come on the 6th morning, and 16th, so we wanted the thing finished on 16th. How to get to Dhaka? Because the Air Force had done a remarkably good job and put both the airfields out of operation. That no aircraft could land it. So we flew in first to Agartala.
I see.
And picked up helicopters there, because that's where all the helicopters were.
Oh, yes.
And then we came down to Dhaka
by helicopter.
And the helicopter and landed at the airport, where Niazi was. And I drove down from the airport to Ramna Racecourse in his car. And by this time, the troops knew, the people knew that this is going to be a surrender. It's amazing how quickly all the news get in. And it was lined on both sides. The road was lined on both sides. But I found that people are banging on the car and they're saying, beast, beast, So I said, well, this is amazing. Then I realized that they were looking at Niazi's car and Niazi's flag. So I told my ADC, I said, so he removed his car flag, which I have as a memento with me. And I put my head out. And after that, it was, Mrs. Gandhi Zindabad, General Aurora Zindabad, and everything else. And so we reached at the Ramna Racecourse, and that is where he signed his surrender, and I countersigned it. And
General Osmani came late.
No, it's rather unfortunate that as this thing developed very suddenly, General Osmani wasn't anywhere to be found. Because he had moved to Sylhet.
I see.
Because he comes from Sylhet.
Yes, that's right.
So when this battle was going on, and Sylhet was about to fall, so he had gone to Sylhet.
Oh, I see.
So that is why at that time, now Air Marshal Khondkar, he was then Group Captain Khondkar, and he was number 2. So I took him along with me, and he was the person who was present at the surrender ceremony.
He signed.
No, why should he sign?
It was surrendered to you, but did they also?
No, point is this. What had happened is, I think I better make it clear, is that I was formally appointed as
the commandant
General Officer Commanding in Chief of Bangladesh and Indian forces.
For both.
So this was not a government affair. It was Niazi surrendering to his counterpart.
It's like Eisenhower in the Second World War.
No, it is like you could say is more like when in the war, I think you could say that one of the German forces surrendering to an opposite general during the war, rather than the government taking the
strategy. That's right. It's a combined force.
That's right. Yes. In fact, the surrender document says is Aurora, General Officer Commanding in Chief, India and Bangladesh forces.
Concur was present.
Yes, Concur was present. That's right. That was in his.
What to do now? Assess the input of the Mukti Bahini in the entire liberation process.
Well, I think the best way I can really explain that is that after the victory, Niazi for a few days as prisoner was stayed in Calcutta, and I called him out to my office.
Yes.
And then during the discussion, how he organized his operations, how he fought, and what were his problem and otherwise. So I asked him, I said, what do you think about the Mukti Bahini? So he said, well, I don't think they were up to very much. And I said, no, what I want to know is that were they able to, what impact they had on the civil population? Was the civil population friendly towards you, or was they? And immediately he said, well, they made me blind. I'm just saying. So he said, because I could not get any information from the civil population as to where your troops were. So the point is, that is the most important.
Exactly.
And whereas in our operations, wherever operation we undertook, we got total cooperation and help from them. For instance, all this river crossing of Meghna, if we didn't have the country boats, we would not have been able to get across.
Also the intelligence.
And similarly, from the western side, when we crossed Madhumati, we had, in fact, only did it with the country boats.
Yes.
And therefore, after having crossed Meghna, we were not on the road, but we were on the railway line. We didn't have we had the rolling stock, but no engine. So we put everything in the rolling stock, and the locals pushed the wagons, and we were going on towards it.
I see.
People who landed by parachute, this battalion, they had no transport. But they commandeered the local cycle rickshaws. Most willingly, those people were helping us to move down onto Dhaka. So,
full cooperation and
tremendous cooperation.
Yes.
And that is, I think, the greatest achievement.
Sometimes, as it always happens, the army, after victory, is accused of looting the civilian population. Were there any such incidents in the case of the Indian Army which went into Bangladesh?
Well, as far as the behavior of the Indian troops during the operation and for the period that they were in Bangladesh, and I don't want to give myself self-praise for it, but I was very conscious of the fact that they must behave themselves when they go in there. And so during the period while we were getting ready for these operations, I had made it a point to drum it into them that they were going to be the real ambassadors of India, because they were the ones who were going to meet people, and therefore they had to behave themselves. And I'm very happy to say that for nearly 3 months that we were in Bangladesh, I did not get a single complaint whatsoever, either our troops looting the civilian property or otherwise misbehaving with anybody. In fact, a few incidents that came to my notice or the notice of my officers there showed that the Bangladeshi public generally held them in high esteem. And if I may again use this expression, that one of the families when we met, they wanted to know why we had not been able to discipline the Mukti Bahini in the manner that our own troops were disciplined. So I have nothing but praise for the behavior of my troops, and in fact I am proud of them. Now I think it's an interesting thing that there is no doubt, I think there were certain number of cases where our troops felt that equipment and canteen stores and other stuff that belonged to the Pakistan army which they had left, they could rightfully appropriate. But I felt that would be misappropriating it. And therefore I sent instructions, and in most cases we were able to return the stuff back to the Bangladesh cantonments. In certain cases I think certain amount of stuff did come out, and in one or two cases I had to take disciplinary action too when I came to know that the officers had not carried out the instruction that I issued. But there are very few cases. What did create a certain amount of misunderstanding between the Bangladesh government, or I should, and ourselves was that we felt that leaving heavy weapons behind there may cause problem and ammunition and so on, because we were worried that large number of people have been given weapons, and because the economic condition in Bangladesh had suffered, and there may be misuse of these, especially by the antisocial elements and so on. But it was somehow the other misunderstood by the powers to be in Bangladesh that we were trying to take away the equipment which belonged to the Pakistan, ammunition and so on, with the intention of using it ourselves. So once we realized that, we said, no, you can have it all. So at one stage I did create a little bit of misunderstanding, which I don't know whether people still talk about it or not. But the moment we came to know that, well, it was not worth our while to make an effort to carry all this out when the Bangladeshi forces themselves may feel that we have not, we have been intentionally trying to rob them of it, if I may use it.
What is your rough estimate of the casualties on both sides?
Assessing the casualties is another point which one may consider, is that as far as casualties suffered by Pakistan troops, I can only give an assessment because we never got any first-hand information, documentary or otherwise. All I can say is that during the operations we captured nearly 3,000 prisoners. But then after the surrender was signed, they joined the rest of them, and the total strength of prisoners, including Pakistani civilian, came to little over 91,000. Our estimate was that there were possibly between 90 to 93,000 troops and paramilitary forces that Pakistani had deployed. And therefore, what was left over of the Pakistani troops and paramilitary forces was something like 84,000 people, that. So my assessment is that they suffered from 6,000 to 8,000 casualties. Some people did get away to Burma. We got that information, but I think that could be a very small number because they had a few helicopters and those helicopters didn't fall into our hands. So I have a feeling that the only place they could have flown to would be Burma next door. But the small strip of common border with Burma goes through very thick jungles and so on. So for any large number of troops to have got across, it was not feasible because that is south of Chittagong, and the majority of the concentration of the troops who were fighting were well north of it. And therefore for them to trek down south of Chittagong and get across, I think was not very feasible. Our own casualties, on the other hand, I can give you the almost exact figure as far as I remember them. We had during all this operation something like 1,450 odd people who were killed. There would be about around about 43 to 48 who were missing during the operations, who we thought some of them might have survived. In fact, some of them would have survived, but I think they were possibly killed by the Pakistani troops rather than taking them prisoners. So total casualty comes to about 1,500 killed. And as far as wounded is concerned, I think it's about 4,500 would be very close to the figure that happened. And that includes wounded of all types, seriously and otherwise.
About the prisoners of war, they were under whose responsibility, and did you have anything personally to do to handling them or taking charge of them?
As far as the prisoners of war and their handling, first thing was to take their surrender. Because at the time of signing the surrender document, Niazi handed over to me his revolver. And by the time that happened, it was already getting dark. So I did not want to disarm the Pakistani troops at night, which may end up into shambles. Neither was I certain that if I disarmed them, they won't get attacked by the civil population. So I made them concentrate in the cantonment in Dhaka that night and stay there with their personal weapons only. And they were disarmed next day under the orders of General Jagjit Singh, who was my senior corps commander and who was staying in Dhaka. It was his forces that had reached Dhaka first. And then, as the rest of the troops were still strung all over the place, and in the same manner the Pakistani troops were also fighting in various pockets. So there they surrendered in those pockets in the course of some on the 17th and other on the 18th. They all surrendered really, but handed over their weapons. That is what happened. And having handed over their weapons, then they became prisoner of war and became our duty to look after them. So in our areas, wherever we were, we established temporary prisoner of war camps. Now the next thing was to bring them out. And the communications weren't so good. So we had to make special efforts, and we used both river craft and surface transport to get them out. And then we sent them off into Madhya Pradesh and Uttar Pradesh, where quickly prisoner war camps had been established. We kept Niazi in Dhaka for a few days, then we evacuated him to Calcutta and kept him there till such time his accommodation was ready in Jabalpur. And I must mention here is that we carried out our promise that we made in the surrender document, that they were all treated in accordance with Geneva Convention, and they were all looked after, and they were fed on the same rations that we gave our own troops. And generally speaking, I think they were pleasantly surprised that they were looked after so well. and treated with dignity.
After 16th of December, you must have visited many parts of Bangladesh, and you might be still remembering the reception, must have been enthusiastic reception of the civilian population after liberation. Some of your reminiscences would be interesting.
In fact, even before the operations came to an end, I made it a point to go and visit all those areas which were getting liberated. A, to see the troops, how their performance was, and B, to see how my troops were behaving. And so I did that. But after the surrender by the Indian Army, by the Pakistan Army, and the operations are over, I went and visited the major towns, Chittagong, Khulna, Barisal, and Tangel, and few others, you know that area. And wherever we went, we were given very warm-hearted reception indeed. Chittagong stands out particularly because all three of us, Army, Navy and Air Force commanders, went together, and we were given a civic reception. And then one very touching scene was that we had, there were ladies present, and after the reception was over and we were at the dock bungalow where lunch has been laid on for us, a meal had been laid on, they expressed a desire, the ladies there, they would like to come and shake me by the hand. It wasn't enough to have seen me there, you know, which I felt was a very nice gesture on their part. Similarly, at Barisal, which is not as well economically developed as other parts of Bangladesh, a person came up to me and came with little presents, and I still carry with me a little wooden boat that is typical of Barisal area. And he said, "This is all that I think I could afford to give you, and I hope you will keep it," and I still have it. Generally speaking, the behavior of the people was extremely warm-hearted. And if I may mention, the fact is that we had promised that we will not stay there for more than 3 months before we started that operation, and we were able to keep that promise. And when we did come out after our farewell parade, which was where the salute was taken by Mujibur Rahman, and he had some very kind thing to say. But I think what was even more heartwarming was the send-off that I was given and my troops are given by the public as such.
One more last question.
Yes.
This is in Kissinger's memoirs, that it is the intervention of the superpowers which stopped India from marching into West Pakistan. But as a journalist at that time, I knew this was a decision of our cabinet not to, after the surrender in Dhaka. What was your have you got anything to say on this?
Yes, I think I knew that there was it was not planned to go to Dhaka, and I think Kissinger uses this as an argument because he failed to frighten the Indian government with the 7th Fleet. And operation in Bangladesh carried on without any hitch. So he had to justify. So I think he felt that this is a convincing argument that if 7th Fleet hadn't come, then India would have invaded West Pakistan and totally destroyed it.
To show their importance more than anything else.
That's right.
Thank you, General. I hope you will be writing your memoirs in there, because these are the raw materials of history. And we really thank you for taking this time.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.